We dig in today. Pick a path here. We've had a couple of families in our church suffer some real tragic loss in the last few days. Very unexpected loss, and we all grieve a little different, and we all have to process through these things a little different. But before we get into the message today, I'd just like to pray for these families. They are a part of this church, and we're family. We come together, we grieve together, we celebrate together, we do things together. So if you just bow your heads as we go to God for this. God, we just know that there are two families that are really, really struggling today with that question of why. And anytime someone near and dear to us loses their life, it's so confusing, and there's no answers, and we don't know why, God. And I just pray that you would bring the peace that surpasses all understanding into both of these families' lives today as they deal with loss and grieve and anger and everything that comes along with it. We just pray that we could come around them as they need that, and we could love them through this time together. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Thanks. So if you're new, we started a series 5 weeks ago now, and we're doing something we don't normally do here as a church. We're moving through the entire Bible. We're not really book by book or passage by passage, or I'm not church. We kind of pick topics and themes and go that way, but we started a series 5 weeks ago called The Whole Story. So we're moving very quickly, rapidly, you might say, through the entire story of God. And there's a reason we have the story. If you didn't know that, there's a reason that God gave us story. Everything points to Him and to His transformational work that brings us back into the story. Now, that may be a little bit confusing, so let me just kind of talk about story for a minute. Stories, we love stories, by the way. It's in our DNA. We're story people, whether you're a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, an atheist, does not matter. We love stories. It's why we love going to the movies. It's why we love Netflix. I've like fallen in love with Netflix because, and one of the best reasons is you can turn it off if you don't like it. Because we engage in good stories. We're made for good stories. We crave good stories. I'm a reader. I like to read good stories. I like good movies. I just finished a series, 6 seasons, 10 episodes a season, 60 episodes of a Netflix thing. That's a lot of binging because I was so caught up in the story. I just couldn't wait to see what happened next. Next episode. We're just kind of caught up in those things. In his book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell references a study done by people who created Sesame Street, in which children were observed as they watched the show to see when they turned their heads and lost interest. The study showed children lost interest in the story not when something exciting wasn't happening or the characters were boring, but when they didn't understand what was happening in the story. In other words, if they didn't get it, even if the story was bringing two stories together or they were making a transition, when the kids couldn't figure out what was going on in the story, they lost interest. Producers tried to remedy the lack of interest by ratcheting up conflict. And we know from Don Miller that every good story needs conflict. We need conflict. But even if there's a lot of conflict, if it doesn't make sense, we check out. Characters, very engaging characters out of story. They're confusing. Producers at Sesame Street worked hard then to make every scene, every segment a very clear story. And because of their work, they retained the average child's engagement an unheard of 80% of the time they watch the show. If I could keep your attention for 80% of the time, it would be out of the park. These are kids. They worked really, really hard with the story. Now, we check out on our own story. We'll look for things to fill our story. We'll watch movies. We'll watch television. We'll get involved in extracurricular. We'll binge on other things, right? We'll fill our story when our story doesn't make any sense. When we feel like there's no meaning, no purpose for me, because that's in our DNA. We're created for that. We're made for that. So here's the question. What if your life was so engaging, your life was so exciting, that entertainment seemed boring? What if you turned on the greatest movie ever and you said, that's boring compared to my life? What if you were involved in something that was so life-giving and so captivating that you didn't seek outside sources to fill that hole? I believe the scriptures hold us to that. Now, a lot of times we read the Bible, a very boring book, right? It's just like, I got to read it's a huge book. It was written thousands of years ago, characters that lived out of context and out of mind. But the Bible all comes together more beautifully when it's about us. It is your story. It's how our story intersects with his story, with God's story. So the reason we are going to move through this over the next year is to hopefully help you find your part in God's story, because you were made to be a part of God's story. He created you to be a part of what he's doing, not only 5,000 years ago, but right here, right now. And it's going to be exciting. I mean, my favorite verse is John 10:10. Jesus says, I come so that you may have life to the fullest. A better life than you've ever dreamed of. That sounds exciting to me. Sounds like fun to me. Sounds like something I want to be involved in. I believe that's what the Bible calls us to when we're talking about kingdom of God life. It revolves around God Father, God Son, us, creation, all working in this beautiful shalom we've talked about, this harmony that God created in the beginning. Now, we started with the book of Job. We're going to start with the book of Job every week until you all get it. Because you haven't, and neither have I. Job doesn't quite understand what's going on. You could read the book of Job. It's an easy book to read. A lot of things go wacky. God makes this cosmic bet with Satan that he can break Job. It goes on, and Job wants to know why. Finally, God speaks, and at the end of Job, we get kind of the paradoxical moment of the book of Job that carries out through the rest of the story, that it's not about Job, right? When we realize this, it's not about us. This is the secret to life, by the way. I told you this 5 weeks ago, and you all looked at me like, that's not true. It's true. When we get to the point where we realize it's not about us, it's about others, it's about how we impact others. That's your why, by the way. Insert Simon Sinek here. We realize that, this is how I fit into the world around me. So God creates creation. It's good. It's the way it's supposed to be. We step in, we humans, because we believe it's not good enough, or Satan tricks us into believing it's not good enough. And then we fall for sin, and so we usurp the way it's supposed to be, right? We sit in God's seat. Creation's not good enough. We'll make it better. And then, as we talked about last week, it goes downhill in a hurry. So we had flood, Tower of Babel. God calls Abraham to go and be a blessing, remember? So here we go. This is how the reset starts. Abraham, I'm calling you to go and be a blessing. So it's not about you, Abraham. Abraham makes the same mistakes we do. You know, he can't have a baby quick enough, and so he gets Hagar involved. And eventually, and this is where we left last week, Sarah and Abraham have a child. They're very, very old. His name is Isaac. Very good. You all read the Bible. Very good, yes. Abraham, Isaac, really quick in Genesis 22, we have this moment where God tests Abraham's faith. And this is one of those stories where some people check out of God's story because they go, how could a God that loves all, that wants good, throw this on Abraham? Because he tells Abraham, go and sacrifice Isaac, which seems a bit strange, really. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. Here I am, he replied. God said, take your son. These are key words. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. Go to the region of Mount Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you. Now, this is an interesting moment. This is the first mention of love in the Bible. The Hebrew word actually means to love or go and love. And it's mentioned in conjunction with what? A father and a son. It's also in the context of a call for sacrifice. It's used in conjunction with a very confusing command. Would that, if God called, go and sacrifice your son, I'd be like, excuse me? Do what? Go and sacrifice your only son? And this first love requires Abraham to give everything. So here we have love, this extraordinary love between a father and a son. It's in conjunction with a sacrifice. It calls for Abraham to give everything. Interestingly enough, the place where God called Abraham to take Isaac is where the first temple was born or planted. Solomon built the first temple in this region, in this spot, where people would come to sacrifice. I love this quote. It's a beautiful, honest, raw, painful, realistic picture of love. Beautiful, honest, raw, painful, realistic picture of love. Verse 12. God says, do not lay a hand on the boy, do not do anything. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld your son, your one and only son. Now, this was a really crazy moment because God now gives Abraham a ram. He says, don't kill your son. I have a ram over here in the thicket. You can sacrifice the ram. So at the time of Abraham, it was a very polytheistic people, many gods. This is the first time in any history that a God has provided the sacrifice rather than demanded the sacrifice. Does that make sense? So now the God of Abraham and now Isaac, we're going to get to Jacob here in a minute, says, hey, I'm going to provide the sacrifice for you. I'm going to give it to you. It's new. It's brand new for these people. I mean, we read it thousands of years later. It makes a lot of sense, but God gives, and this is going to be the story. He gives to us. Now remember, there's a covenant between Abraham and now Isaac and a minute Jacob that I will if you will. God says, I will if you will. Go be a blessing. I'm going to bless you if you go be a blessing. But I'm going to give. I'm going to give. God is a giver. So this is kind of how we're going to leave the story of Abraham and Isaac. And we're going to jump ahead. Isaac would eventually marry a lady named Rebekah. Genesis 24, Abraham dies in chapter 25. We also get a big list of the sons of Ishmael, which was I know we're covering a lot of ground here, son of Hagar, which was the maidservant of Sarai, who became Sarah. Very confusing. But anyways, these characters are all going to play out in the story as time goes on. Rebekah gives birth. So Rebekah is the wife of Isaac. Are you tracking with me? We're covering a lot of ground here. So we have Abraham, we have Isaac. Isaac gets married to Rebekah. Rebekah gives birth to two sons. One of my favorite stories in the Bible. The two sons who are they? Jacob and Esau. Yeah, you guys know. I don't even need to preach today. And Jacob is the firstborn twin. Okay, they were twins, but one comes first. Jacob is the firstborn twin. They name him Jacob. Sorry, if your name is Jacob. Jacob means the deceiver. Lovely thing to name your kid. But anyways, Jacob the deceiver, basically he's the liar, he's the conniver. I don't know why you would name your kid that, but they named him Jacob. Esau, he's the second born, and he's very red. He's got hair all over him, so they name him Red Hairy Guy. Esau, there you have it. Jacob, as he grows up, he kind of stays around home. He hangs out with Rebekah. He becomes Rebekah's favorite. He learns to cook. He kind of, he's just stays around home. Esau, on the other hand, he's a hunter, gatherer. He wants to go out and kill big game and bring it back. And one day when the boys are older, Esau's been out for a couple days. He's obviously not a very good hunter because he comes back empty-handed. And he's starving. He's like, I'm starving to death. And Jacob has a giant pot. I wish I could say something good, but a giant pot of lentil soup. And Esau says, Jacob, you got to give me some of that soup. I'm starving to death. I've been out in the field for days. I need some of that soup. And again, we're going to see how sin always revolves around food. I don't know why that is, but it seems to. I need some of that soup. And Jacob's like, well, give me your birthright. Now, birthright was really, really important because the oldest got everything, the oldest boy. So that was the birthright. They got everything. And Esau's like, what good is a birthright if I starve to death? Like we do when we're really hungry. And so he trades his birthright or sells his birthright his inheritance for a bowl of lentil soup. He's not a really smart guy, but anyways, it's how the story goes. Genesis 27, pick the story back up when Isaac, he was very old, he couldn't see, so he calls Esau the older son. He's the older son. I may have got that wrong before. Jacob's not born, Esau's born first. He steals the birthright, yeah. So Esau's the oldest by a few minutes or whatever, a few hours. Jacob's the second born. He says, Esau, come to the tent. I'm really old. I don't know when I might die. Take your bow and quiver and go into the open country. Hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me my favorite dish. Here we go again, food. Bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die. So what is the blessing? Well, this is the Abrahamic blessing. This is the blessing that God gave. I'm going to bless you, Abraham. I pick you to go be a blessing to all nations, to carry out to bring the world back to the way it's supposed to be. This is your job. It's on you. And so Isaac calls Esau. He says, come into my tent. I want to pass this on to you. So he goes out to hunt. Rebekah, his mom, overhears Isaac, and he says to Esau, so when Esau left to hunt for wild game, she said to Jacob, listen, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flocks, bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll prepare them to make your father's favorite dish. Again, it's all about food. I don't know why I'm throwing that out there, but it's all about your favorite. I actually have that underlined in my Bible. I'm making your favorite dish. I'll make your favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you, Jacob, before he dies. Jacob said, Mom, my brother Esau, he's a hairy man. My skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? You'll see I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me. So these are really important moments. He'll curse me. And his mother replied, let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Go out and get the goats for me. So Jacob went out, he got a young goat for his mother, and she took it and prepared the delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Rare, big baked potato, whatever that was, right? Just the way he liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were in the house, gave them to her younger son, Jacob. She covered his arms, the smooth part of his neck, with skin of young goats. She gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. Come on. How do you turn that down, right? I mean, I was thinking of Waz. I always read this. He always loves a lot. It's got to be fresh, hot bread with lots of butter. Yes, so this is all going on. This is like sensory overload for Isaac. He can't see, he can smell, and his taste buds are on over. It's his favorite meal. And now it's coming with a big loaf of bread covered in butter. He takes it to his father. Yes, my son, Isaac. And Isaac, he asked Jacob, who are you? What is your name? Because it doesn't sound like Esau. Is it Esau or is it Jacob? Who are you? What is your name? Of course, Jacob, he lies. It's not the way it's supposed to be. He usurps God's plan. He steps in and decides he needs it a little better. He says, it's Esau, Dad. Don't you recognize me? I'm your firstborn son. He steps in, and we've talked about the hierarchy that God put in place. God Father, God Son, God Spirit, us, creation. We're made to live in this hierarchy, in this beautiful harmony, shalom that God made. And sin is when we usurp that, when we go, I think I could do better. I could step in. And so Jacob does. He says, he lies. I'm Esau. I'm your firstborn son. I've done what you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing. Isaac said, how'd you find it so quickly? You already hunted and you killed it and you brought it to me? Well, the Lord your God put it in my path. So now he throws God under the table. I was thinking, Dell and I have been talking about Job a lot. One of the sins that Job's friends kind of fell into, that they made it God's fault. I'll tell you why things are going so bad for you. You did something wrong, and now it's God's fault. So Jacob kind of takes the onus off this, and a lot of times we do this as Christians. We go, well, this must be God's what? Plan. This must be God's plan, even though it's not God's plan. I'm making it my plan. Must be God's fault. The Lord your God put it in my path. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come close so I can touch you and make sure that you are really Esau. Jacob went close to his father, and Isaac touched him, the voice of Jacob, but the hands are Esau. Isaac said, but he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy like Esau. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. Are you really my son? One more time. Is it really you? Yeah, Jacob says, it's really me. He lies again. He confirms the lie. It's really me. Bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you your blessing. He brought it to him and he ate it. He brought some wine and he drank it. And then his father Isaac said to him, come here, son, and kiss me. So he went and he kissed him. And when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him. This was the blessing. May nations serve you and people bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. This is the Abrahamic blessing. This is exactly what God speaks into Abraham. He's passing that on. Abraham, Isaac, and now he thinks it's Esau, but it's Jacob. After he finished blessing him, Jacob scarcely left the presence, and Esau came home from hunting. He prepared some tasty food, brought it to his father, and he said, my father, sit up and eat some of my game so that you can bless me. And his father asked him, who are you? What's your name? He says, I'm your firstborn son, Esau. It's me, Esau. Isaac trembled violently, and he said, who brought me that game before you? And I ate it, and I blessed him. I've already passed the blessing on. I've already given it to him. Now, for us, you're just like thinking, take it back, right? But in this culture, in this context, he couldn't. He'd already delivered the blessing on. He'd already given it to whoever came in first and said that they were you. I gave the blessing to them. He said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. Esau said, he is rightly named Jacob, the deceiver. He is rightly named Jacob. This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright. Not really. Esau sold it to him, by the way. But he took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Isaac said, I have made him lord over you and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you? Esau begged him, do you have one blessing for me? Just one? Can't you give me anything? Esau wept aloud, and he held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And he said, the days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother. Which, this is a great story. I mean, if you were watching this on TV, you'd be like, what's next, right? I mean, this is a great story. There's conflict. There is evil. There's a good guy and a bad guy and a mom and a son and a dad. There's a great story going on here. When Rebekah was told what her oldest son Esau had done, she sent for Jacob, and he said, hey, your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Run. Fast as you can. Run away. Another ongoing redundant theme of Scripture, our theme, by the way. We sin, we usurp God, we step into a situation we shouldn't have, or we do something we shouldn't have done, we don't do something we should have done, we don't know what to do, we're afraid, we're guilty, we feel a lot of shame, and so what do? Run. We run. We run from God, and we run from each other. We hide. And we humans are really good at it, and we learned it from Adam and Eve, by the way. They hid in the garden from God and from each other. This is his ongoing theme. They run from guilt and from shame. Chapter 28, when Jacob reaches a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones and he put it under his head and he lay down to sleep. And he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with its top reaching to heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And this is where we get the song. And nobody laughs. You didn't think that was funny. I'm finding a stairway to heaven. It's not really where we get the song. But you'll never forget that, hopefully. Or maybe you'll never come back. I don't know. On the ladder, on the stairway stood God the Lord. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. And I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. So God is now Abraham has passed the blessing on to Jacob, and now God is passing on the blessing to Jacob. You're going to inherit all of this land. Your descendants will be like dust on the earth. You will spread out to the west and the east and the north and the south, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Remember, the covenant is, I will if you will. I'm going to bless you, Isaac, or Jacob, only if you will bless others. You have a part to play in the story. I am with you, God says. I will watch over you, and wherever you go, I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So Jacob goes on. He marries Leah and Rachel. Great story. We're not going to get there today. In Genesis 29, he tricks his father-in-law out of a bunch of sheep and lambs and goats. Funny story, great story. But he kind of lives up to his name, the deceiver. He's really good at it. He has a knack for that, for like conning people out of things. He has a great verbal presence about him. He's able to kind of talk people. He has the gift I have, which is unfortunate. The gift of woo. You know what the gift of woo, the strengths finder? WOO. That stands for winning others over. So it can be a really, really good gift. It can also be used for bad, because you can use it for your own good rather than the good of others. What's in it for me? We call that sin. We all have a gift we can use for good or for evil. We finally get to chapter 32. Jacob finds out Esau is coming. And just like any brother, he's scared. And last time he saw his brother, he left him, hey, I'm just going to kill you, know that. And so he knows Esau is coming. During the night, Jacob got up and took his two wives, his two servant wives, and his 11 sons, and he crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. This left Jacob all alone in camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and he wrenched it out of socket. Then the man said, let go of me, for the dawn is breaking. So Jacob is tough. He has this physical wrestling match. He's got a certain something about him. So he doesn't know at this moment what. It's just some guy broke into his camp and they grapple all night long. Jacob said, I'm not going to let go of you, because the man says, let go of me. And he goes, Jacob says, I'm not going to let go of you unless you bless me. Well, Jacob, you've already been blessed. What's going on here? And then the man asked him a question. What's your name? Now, the last time Jacob's been asked this in the story, and we know the story, he lied. He said his name was Esau. I'm the hairy guy. This time, he decides to tell the truth. I'm Jacob, the deceiver, the liar, the con artist. That's me. I'm Jacob. The man says in verse 28, you will no longer be called Jacob. I'm going to give you a new name. From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. And Israel, the name Israel means one who wrestles with God. And this is a great paradigm for which to see our journey with God. I mean, the Israelites, that's where the Israelites come from. We know that, right? From Israel, who was Jacob. They wrestle with God. There's this ongoing match of who are you? Who am I? Who are you? Who am I? Why do you want to know my name? The man replied, because he says, please tell me your name. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God. I have seen God face to face, yet he has spared my life. And the sun was rising as Jacob left, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. So he has a scar of his night with wrestling with God. Physical defect. I was talking to Kathy Murphy this week. We got on the subject of the Apostle Paul, who wrote that he had a thorn in his side. We don't know what that thorn was. Some people think it was an addiction. Maybe it was women issues, money issues. But many of you know Rod and Kathy, and Kathy was like, maybe it was just chronic pain. If any of you have struggled with chronic pain, you can't get over it. And this is where Paul says, but Jesus, your grace is sufficient. It's sufficient. So Jacob wrestles with God. He throws his hip out of joint. He walks with a limp the rest of his life. So he meets Esau the next day, and it turns out much differently than Jacob thought it was going to turn out. And I think for many of us, once we kind of confess, we get that out there like, this is who I really am. We always think the worst. And Esau comes, and he just embraces Jacob. You're my brother. I'm going to walk with you. Everything's going to be okay. He restores the relationship. And I think this is a great metaphor illustration for life after this, because this is going to happen. The same story is going to happen over and over and over and over and over. And it happens to us. We fail. We hurt someone. We're hurt. Something blows up in our lives. We can't go on. Maybe we've lied. Maybe we've usurped the way it's supposed to be. We hide. We run. We run away. We talked about this the second week of this series. Sometimes we just need to set in a moment and get what's in here out here, the truth. We need to get the truth out here. Jesus says in John 8, the truth will set you free. Because once the truth is exposed for what it is, here's the lie I told. Now what? The enemy has no hold on you any longer. The truth is out. Now there may be consequences for that, and there's always issues for that. But then we have a choice. We can now repent and go the other direction, which is back to the way it's supposed to be, because you were created to be a part of God's story. And we get lost in the story because we've forgotten who we are. We're just dust. But we also have spirit in us. There's a part of us that's so good that God put in us, and it's just beautiful. It's full of grace and love and forgiveness. And then there's a part in us that's broken. Sin entered into us, but it has been overcome by what Jesus accomplished on the cross. Sin and death have been put to rest. Now you say, well, it's still alive in me. Yes, I know, but it can be on its way out. It could be on its way out. And it starts with this story that, we just fess up. This is who I really am, but I don't want to live like this anymore. I told you, I think it was week 1 or 2, one of the reasons, the reason we came to Maricopa to plant a church is so I could let people know this. And this is so important. If you're struggling, if you're emotionally, spiritually, if you just can't figure it out, if you just don't know what to do, I want you to know you don't have to live like that anymore. You don't have to. Now, there's this process. Doesn't happen instantly, but you can be free. And when you live free, you're living a good life. You find your way back into the story, and you become part of God's story. And it's found through repentance, going back, confession, getting what's in here, out here, and then re-engaging with the story God created you to live. I'm going to take communion today. So I'm going to invite you to stand with me, and we're going to pray as we take this cup. I think we said a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week, That communion, there's a lot of things going on that last night that Jesus shares the bread and the wine with his disciples. But I think it was in John, he says, this is a sign of the new covenant. We're not under the old covenant. The old covenant was, I will if you will. God says, I will if you will. This is the new covenant, and God says, I will even if you won't. I'm going to make a choice to give my one and only son as a gift. Sacrificial gift. And when you take this bread and this cup, it's a sign that you are re-engaging back into the church and into creation, into shalom, into the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to pray, and you're free to come forward or to the back, take the bread and cup, and if you want to take that back to your seat and share that with your family or with each other, and we'll close in a minute. Father God, as we read this ancient text, and for some of us, we've heard these stories literally hundreds of times. May we find a new life in them, new wind in them, fresh wind in them, God. Maybe a fresh fire that you've ignited in us, that we can remember who we are. We are created by you, and we are asked to come back into your family, Father, through what you accomplished on the cross. It's our choice. Give us the courage we need to make that choice, the courage